So can we start?
Yeah, yeah.
Kishore, do you have to keep our video on for the entire 1.5 hours?
Maybe you can switch off your video, but when you speak, I think it'll be better if you switch on the video.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir. This is Shifali from Montreal.
Oh, morning. Morning to you, evening for us.
Yes.
So is the situation improved here in Canada?
Yes, definitely, sir. Cases are going down here and they're easing restrictions, but still they are very, very cautious, sir. So they haven't really opened up in a big way.
So restaurants and all have opened or no?
Yes, they have opened, but some kind of restrictions are there. Not many people can sit together, and they are partitioning of tables and all.
And what about offices? Are people still working from home?
Mostly from home, sir. ICAO is physically closed till 15th, and probably sometime in the middle of next month, I think it will be open completely.
Okay. Okay.
Kishorji, can we start?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, depending from where you all have joined, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, especially to all the participants for this webinar, which GMR is conducting, and also the distinguished panelists who have joined from across the globe. Today's webinar topic is very, very interesting in the sense, last time the first series of the webinar was about how to revive the operations, and now after our experience of starting the domestic operations, the next important thing is how do we unlock the international travel. And as you all know, pre-COVID, very exciting times for the aviation industry. India was growing at double digit, and everywhere capacity enhancement was the buzzword. A lot of technology related issues were there to enhance the capacity and the service experience for the passengers. And suddenly this pandemic has struck, and during the 2 months of lockdown, lot of work, background work has happened, because this was the only mode of transport which was operational during the pandemic. Lot of evacuation flights, lot of cargo flights to bring the essential health equipment. As you all know, this is one of the lifelines for the entire country. And last month, the government has taken the bold step, I should say the bold step, in the sense coordinating with all the state governments. And when the lockdown was getting eased out, the domestic operations have started. And the airports especially and the airlines worked during these 2 months of lockdown to work on how to communicate that air travel is the most safest travel for the people. And a lot of activities have been undertaken by both the airports and the airlines to see that contactless traveling, safe traveling, hygiene and disinfection across various touch points, a lot of bringing in technology and innovations. All these things were worked out by the airports and as well as the airlines. The ministry and the government has really worked with all the stakeholders to see that the stress level which a potential passenger would have once the operations start, that will be eased out. And I'm very happy to say that the first phase, coordinating with all the state governments, all the quarantine procedures, I think it's a big achievement for India that the domestic operations have started and the traffic is picking up. Of course, we are just around 10 to 15% of pre-COVID traffic. But currently, I think with the success of the first phase of the domestic operations, government has decided to enhance it to 45% of the domestic pre-COVID traffic volumes. So that itself is a big achievement. Now, the next important focus area is to see how the international traffic can be opened up. So as I see, it is more than the industry, it is government to government. It is also health related issues. How the governments can, how the nations can get confidence that the arriving passengers are free of any of the symptoms and the ailment. And similarly, how do we bring in the confidence among the potential passengers to travel long distance, especially international segments? So while the airports have done a lot of new technology and innovation based activities to ensure that people feel confident, now how do we ensure that the international traffic can revive? I think that is one of the major issues which we'll be discussing today. There are talks of identifying green bubbles between two countries. Recently, EU has come out with new guidelines as to how they are opening up the traffic for 15 countries. They have come out with certain norms of the destinations to which the traffic is going to operate. And we at GMR, especially both Delhi and Hyderabad, we almost handle around 35 to 40% of the Indian traffic. We have taken a lot of steps to ensure that passengers feel that the airports are safe and secure, using technologies, using various disinfection measures, using various contactless and tracking technologies. So I think now with this success in the first phase of the lockdown, now the focus should be on how do we start the international flights. There is a huge pent-up demand, as you all know, especially from students, from people who have stuck up in various parts of the globe to come to their native places. So how do we look into various issues related to the long distance international travel, especially from the point of public health risks, border controls, operational situations at the airports and the airlines, and also how do we ensure in the long haul how the passengers get the in-flight food and other things. So this is very really, I think, a very pertinent and very relevant subject which we have chosen for today's webinar. And to add to that, we have a very illustrious panel. Today, I am extremely privileged to have Sri Arvind Singh ji, who is my senior in the IAS and also the chairman of the Airports Authority. As you all know, Airports Authority runs almost most of the airports in India, around 126 airports, with almost a dozen of them are international airports. As a part of the government, Mr. Arvind Singh is also one of the key policy decision maker. He plays a major role. So it will be very interesting to hear from him as to what is the thought process in government of India, what is the sort of discussions and engagements they are having with other nations to see that the international travel start immediately. As you all know, last 2 to 3 fortnight, I think the Vande Bharat flights are operating as predominantly by the Air India, and now there is a demand from the other countries to permit their airlines to also to operate to India. So I think in the near future, international operations will start out of India. And similarly, we have Mrs. Dr. Shifali Juneja, who was with the ministry before and currently in Montreal in a very prestigious position in the International Civil Aviation Organization. She is the representative of Government of India there. And thank you, Shifali ji. It's a very early morning there for you, but you took the pains to join this webinar. As you all know, ICAO plays a major role in coming out with standard recommendations and practices. And as far as the COVID pandemic is concerned, ICAO has created a separate task force, the Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, which has come out with its recommendations as to how to revive the air traffic post the pandemic. They have come out with certain strong recommendations for airports, airlines, and the governments. So it will be very interesting to listen from Shifaliji as to what is the thought process, because it's not an India issue, it's a global issue, and everyone is very, very keen that normal operations of civil aviation start. So we are very privileged and honored to have Shifaliji to give her views on this particular topic. Then we have two Khoslas. It was a pleasure meeting them just before the panel discussion. One is my old friend Amitabh Khosla, who is the India director for IATA, and which is the body of the most of the international carriers. And it will be very, very interesting to see what is the thought process. He has already warned that he has very, very pessimistic statistics to reveal to us. But at the same time, being an optimist, I'm sure that these pessimistic numbers will be a past, and the statistics and the data will start growing in the positive direction. So it will be very interesting to listen from Mr. Amitabh Khosla as to what is the thinking which is happening in the various international air carriers across the globe. And then we have Mr. Rohit Khosla, who is representing the hospitality industry. He is from the Taj Group, and he has extensive experience in the hospitality industry and also in-flight catering. He is the EVP for operations in the Taj Group. And as a lifelong hotelier, he has overseen many a Taj property in both in India and also countries outside India. So it will be very useful to know how the hotel sector has got impacted and what are the plans they have to revive the the hospitality industry. And as you all know, both the civil aviation and the hospitality industries are closely tied and correlated. So each segment's destiny depends on the other. So it'll be very interesting to know from his views, like what are the plans and how does he look at the current situation and what is his future prediction for the industry. And also he may also give some thoughts of his with regards to what could be the best practices for long haul flights, especially from the point of in-flight catering and the food for the passengers who are traveling in the long haul aircrafts. So without much ado, I request Shri Arvind Singh ji to address us. We would like to hear, sir, from you. What is the thinking of the government about reopening the international travel in the true sense, and also how the Indian airports are equipped to safeguard the passengers' safety and their experience. Meanwhile, before Mr. Arvind Singh starts his address, I would like to once again welcome all the participants for this particular webinar. And if you have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A box. And as and when we get opportunity, I will try to see that some of your questions are answered by the panelists. So, sir, Arvind Singh, sir, if you can address the webinar.
Thank you, Kishore. Thanks for the introduction and very kind words. Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone to everyone. And I'm glad to note this initiative has been taken by the GMRGroup. Organized this webinar for the benefit of the aviation fraternity and all its stakeholders, and especially because the theme is very relevant in the current situation that we all are facing. As we all know, COVID-19 has affected all the sectors across the country, and aviation and its associated industries are one of the worst affected. The tours and travel and hospitality sectors have also been impacted severely. We are aware that in India, scheduled international and domestic flights were suspended in the end of March, one on the 22nd of March and the second on the 25th of March. And though domestic flight operations have been started since the 25th of May, as mentioned by Kishore earlier while giving his introductory remarks, it will take some time for normalcy to come back for the aviation sector. And as most studies and most experts are telling us, there is going to be a substantial reduction in India in the scale of airline and airport operations in this financial year 2021. So although commercial operations except cargo flights were stopped in the end of March, airports and airlines stood firm on commitments, and we worked hard along with other stakeholders in the system to operate the Lifeline Udan missions and the Vande Bharat mission to ensure the availability of medical supplies, essential services, and evacuation of Indians around the world, as well as some foreign nationals who were struck in India and wanted to return to their home countries. The government initially gave permission for 1/3 of the domestic flight to operate as per the summer schedule, and now it has been scaled up to 45%. And we expect that passenger and traffic as well as the fleet numbers are expected to increase. Since the 25th of May, when domestic flights were resumed, we have seen more than 2 million people travel on domestic flights to various parts of the country. And this is, if you see in terms of numbers, this is a very large number who have traveled in this 1 month, or slightly over 1 month that the domestic operations have been started. On an average, every day nowadays, we are operating 800 flights in the country, and about 70,000 travelers are using the air mode of travel to travel. And after resumption of domestic flight operations, the cleanliness of every nook and corner of the airports is being ensured by all the airport operators in the country, including the Airports Authority of India and the other private JV airports, especially the larger ones at Delhi, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Cochin, and other private sector held airports. Terminal buildings are sanitized at regular intervals. Baggage and shoes of passengers are sanitized at the entry gate. Sanitizers are placed at strategic locations for passengers and the airport staff. And social distancing norms, as directed by the health authorities of both the government of India and the state government, are followed at every meeting point. And queues at entry point, check-ins, security and boarding. At all these queues also we are following these directives. Seating arrangements at the airports have been devised to maintain sufficient distance among passengers. and stickers and markings have been provided at appropriate locations for guiding passengers. All airport staff who handle these flights have been provided with the required personal protection equipment for safety, and biohazardous garbage or waste which is generated as a result of the flights is disposed following scientific procedures, and the use of baggage trolleys is discouraged at the airport. Domestic flight operations are increasing slowly, and airports are receiving positive feedback from the passengers for efficient handling of domestic operations with due precautions. And we are hopeful that airports will witness surge in passenger traffic in the coming future if we ensure the complete safety of passengers. Yes, Kishore, there is a persistent demand from the Indian community across the globe to restart scheduled international operations. And for that, we must appreciate that in this changed situation, it's not like pre-COVID commercial operations. So in this changed situation post-COVID-19, the government of India is regularly holding discussions with counterpart governments, because you need to have counterpart, the destination and the receiving countries also to be on board. And there are discussions to explore the possibilities to resume scheduled international operations. And this becomes very difficult due to not only difference in opinion among country representatives, just as we face a host of different protocols and standard operating procedures within states in the country. Many a times this was the first, problems for us with that. Many, if you went to a state, there was no quarantine, but if you went to B state, you had to undergo quarantine. So similarly, there are differences and in perceptions and the levels of the epidemic that are different, present in parts of the globe and in different countries. The Ministry of Civil Aviation, I'm aware, and since, of course, as the Airports Authority, we don't only deal with this subject, but I'm in touch with people who are doing it. And this morning, I took a brief from the key points person who's negotiating with the countries. And he says that we are in constant touch. We are working on a consensus to start the feasibility of international flying. And this is going to be in, air bubbles. So talks are mainly were going on with India and US and Canada, India and Europe, and India and the Gulf countries to start flights in these bubbles mutually with Indian carriers and the carriers of those nations. EU has now banned flights of India, rise in cases from India, but I'm sure there will be a positive outcome of the talks with US, Canada, and with the Gulf, and negotiations are going on. In the interim, of course, repatriation flights, charter flights are being approved by the government on a case-to-case basis. So from the airport's perspective, we should be ready to implement these additional measures to facilitate international commercial operations. If these negotiations fructify and operations start, one possibility is that if they start in July, we should be ready. And once head from the government, and we get the guidelines from civil aviation authorities, I think we should be fully geared up to facilitate the commencement of national flights. While mentioning all this, we must realize that the government is also proactively, thinking of several other measures to revive the atmosphere among the stakeholders because of the decline in traffic. And one of these is there is a serious thinking and work going on the easing of use of airspace for use by the civilian flights, because there is a large amount of airspace which is restricted for use in the country on defense and security considerations. We're talking to how we can release more. Concessions to MRO facilities, because maintenance and repair operations don't happen on a large scale in India. So if some tax concessions can be given. And of course, to speed up the process of privatization of Airports Authority of India airports, because this method has given good service to passengers and also yielded very good revenue for the Airports Authority and the government in the past. Now, if we talk about the flexible use of airspace, this will result in huge savings for airlines, because it saves up to 50% of the operating cost of the airlines, which is mainly fuel costs. If I have to give you an example, if we take the Mumbai-Srinagar sector, which is a very busy sector, if the air route is provided through reserved defense airspace, the route will be shorter by 112 nautical miles one way, and this translates to almost a saving of about 80,000 rupees per flight and a per day saving of 12.8 lakhs of rupees, because there are 16 scheduled flights in this sector. So that just gives you, I've given you an example of a sector. If this is applied to several other sectors which will benefit, there will be substantial financial benefits to the sector, bring in more efficiencies. On airports privatization, while the Airports Authority Board has recommended for the leasing out of additional 6 brownfield airports. These are the airports of Amritsar, Bhubaneswar, Raipur, Indore, Ranchi, and Trichy. And we are in the process of seeking the Government of India, the cabinet approval for that. We expect that shortly, perhaps in this month, and then with the process of bidding for these airports will start. Of the earlier round of bidding, we have already issued letters of award for 3 airports, namely Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and Lucknow. And we have executed the agreement with the who won the bid. And for the remaining 3, we also expect early decision, that is Guwahati, Trivandrum, and Jaipur. We also expect a decision this month to award the remaining 3 which were bidded last time. So to conclude, these are extraordinary times. It's not normal for a pandemic to force a worldwide lockdown and impact the global economy adversely. It's a once in a century event. And it is an unprecedented challenge that none of us were ready for. But adversity is a great teacher. It not only challenges the mighty, it also gives way to creativity and innovation. So those who face tough times embrace the challenges, and I'm sure we will use it as an opportunity to grow. We are all getting used to the new normal, and it is time that we too embrace this new normal. The aviation sector has successfully faced and overcome a lot of challenges in the past, including natural calamities like cyclones, floods, earthquakes, as well as economic recession, deep economic recession whenever it has happened. And I'm sure this time also engage and bounce back with more vigor. My best wishes for the success of this webinar, and thank you for hearing me out. Thank you.
For your update on what are the deliberations and discussions happening between India and other countries where we are trying to resume the international operations. As I was going through all the questions, sir, many requests and questions on how do we resume operations to UAE and Canada. I think these are the 2 popular destinations where the participants are requesting for resumption of flights. And in this connection, I have a supplementary question, Arvind Singh sir, as to, as you said, till 15 July, the international operations have been shut down. So do you think post 15 July, there is any chance of early resumption of flights? Or at least like Air India is operating the Vande Bharat flights, is there any thought that we allow the other countries' aircrafts also to come to India to have at least some sort of operations between those 2 countries, especially UAE and Canada?
Yes, as I mentioned, when I talked to the person in the ministry who's dealing with these countries, and they are at a very advanced level. He says, according to him, the effort is to restart international operations as the earliest. But of course, they are talking to these countries, mainly US, Canada, countries in Europe. Europe, the situation has got complicated a little with the EU ban, and Middle East. So right now there is clear, movement possible on US, Canada, and Middle East. So one possibility is that you allow charter flights from, say, the Middle East to come to India, and on the way back, they can carry passengers. So these are, of course, subject to negotiations which are going on between the governments and other stakeholders. But one must also remember that in this situation, you also have the state governments on board. Because very often what will happen is, say, a certain state has a particular quarantine, protocol, and a large number of people, say from the Gulf, they would like to come to Kerala or to Hyderabad or to, locations like this, where, we send a number of people out. Does this have the capacity to quarantine so many people who arrive? So this is an additional complexity that has come in, that the states also have to be on board, and do they have adequate quarantine facility to quarantine the increasing numbers who are coming? All these factors are being worked out, and I'm sure when it smoothens out, just like the Vande Bharat flights have come in, and more than 1,000 people have been into India by Air India, private airlines, charter service. A large number has come to India in the last few months. The Vande Bharat started in May, so it's been just 2 months old, and a large number have flown. So I'm sure, these kind of results we'll see in this regard also.
So thank you, sir. I think I pick up the hint, what you are saying, that the resumption of international flights is around the corner, and we will be very happy to see them operating. I think that would pacify most of the questions which are coming from the participants. Thank you very much, sir. Now, may I request Dr. Shifali Juneja to tell us how ICAO views this global travel scenario, and what they have to do to recommend the rules for the member state. As Mr. Arvind Singh has already mentioned, the member states consent is required to start the international operations. So it's almost 100 plus days of lockdown in some parts of this world. So and self-imposed isolation is taking heavy toll on the economy. So I think ICAO has a major role as an international civil aviation organization to play in this. So it would be very interesting to hear from Dr. Shefali Juneja. Dr. Shefali Juneja.
Thank you, Kishore. First of all, I'd like to thank the GMR for giving me this opportunity to be present in this webinar today. And it is, of course, a very, very important subject. And it is today what we are looking at at the global level is the restart of international travel. As you said, that the entire airlines have come to a grinding halt due to the pandemic. But we have seen that gradually as restrictions of social or of lockdown are easing in different parts of the world, they are also looking, towards restarting international travel. And what ICAO has basically done is that it has taken a lead to interact with other international organizations such as the WHO, the World Tourism Organization, as well as with the industry global level industry players such as IATA as well as ACI to develop a set of standard norms for safe and sustainable travel of passengers. Now, the whole idea behind this is that there is no patchwork of measures which are taken. The world over, all states follow the same standards and recommended practices for safe and healthy travel, and public health is kept at the center stage of resuming air travel. With this intention, ICAO established what is known as the Aviation Recovery Task Force, which first of all spelled out that what is the principle behind it. So the principle behind is that public uh, health is of course to be the center stage, but what is also important that harmonized standards and measures are implemented all over the world. And with this intention, ICAO has come up with what is known as a takeoff guideline. Now, this takeoff, as the word would say, that it indicates that ICAO is now wanting the states to start seriously working on restarting their international travel. And what they have prescribed in this guideline is that what can ensure that there are clean airports, there are clean aircrafts, there are clean crew, clean cargo, as well as all the as Mr. Khosla later will be talking about, all the food that we are served inside the catering part is also clean. So this will completely repose the trust of passengers to once again start tracking of international travel. So with this, the idea is that we are working very closely with WHO, and these standard practices that we have said in these guidelines are based on inputs from the health practitioners, as well as they are the best health sector practices. So this is a kind of a reassurance to the passenger that when he is going on an international flight, he, as far as whatever, as Mr. Arvind Singh said, whatever is the new normal, that is, we all know that COVID-19 is still continuing, and we have to be cautious whenever we go out into the world. So we have to therefore follow certain health procedures, which may include, of course, the personal hygiene, the sanitation, the cleanliness, as well as social distancing, and so on. So as what ICAO has also said is that each government must also try to bring in what is known as contact tracing. And we have to be sure that each passenger, when he comes, we have the details and whom he interacts with, uh, and how he proceeds further in his journey. So this record has to be maintained. So with this idea, the ICAO is working towards enabling states to restart their aviation. It has already developed a website which is known as a response website to COVID-19, which gives complete details of what is happening in different parts of the world, which airports are, having flights, which air routes are open, as with how many flights are working. It's a dynamic platform which says how many flights are actually going in different parts of the world. It also gives information regarding what measures different states have taken regarding the lockdown and the special procedures they've outlined because of COVID-19. It also has special inputs from some states who want some, some help. So it has got some implementation packages which talks about, the experts' guidance in dealing with COVID-19, and it is also rolling out what is known as an implementation roadmap, in which it will be reaching out to each and every state, and this will be they will be asking them that how they are implementing the cart regulations or the cart regime, and do the gap analysis thereafter. It has also given a facility to the states to all to submit their differences. If they are not able to implement the card procedures, then they can submit their differences, and that also will be on the ICAO website. So this is how we're trying here to ensure that international travel starts once again. But what Mr. Arvind Singh touched upon is that each national government has, imposed a whole lot of restrictions on air travel, and they have said that international travel may be discouraged. So I think time is right now for them to rethink on these measures. And we have global examples now. We have, of course, the European Union taking, the lead in allowing 15 countries to start operations to Europe. Plus, we have leading airlines like Etihad saying that by mid of July they will be starting 15 destinations. We have China saying that in this year itself they will come back to 90% of their capacity. We have Air Canada saying that people want to fly. Please lift the restrictions on air travel. So I think that is a very important aspect, and it has to be again. ICAO can play a limited role in this because bilateral air service agreements dominate this relationship. And what is being talked about, and what I think Amitabh Khosla will talk in detail, is some kind of air bridges or air bubbles, which is nothing more. It's a mutual understanding between states, that we respect your public health procedures and we are open to allowing people from your country to visit our country. So I've been seeing that, the whole lot of questions and answers are about when international travel to different parts of the world will begin. I think we have to be very, very optimistic about it. And clearly, the governments are already started working on these lines. They are talking to their counterparts, and they are trying to, uh, ensure that when people from India travel to another destination, they are welcome there, and they do not face any problem once they are there. So I think that is the very start point. Another very important aspect here is that a lot of our airlines, have been facing financial problems. So there's a lot of, consumers are looking at, that if they make a booking, whether their bookings will be inflexible, what kind of fares are they going to get, and they do a cancellation, are they going to get a refund? So somehow the public confidence in the airlines is also little wary at this point of time, and it will take some time for them to have repose more confidence. And as I think this will be the part which we'll talk probably later, is the recovery part. So this would come into the recovery part of it, because it will be dominated by macroeconomics. So I won't like to go into it here. So we're talking about restart, and I think we are very, very optimistic about it. So that's all my opening parts for now. So thank you.
Thank you, Shifali ji. I think you have highlighted the efforts being made by ICAO to come out with standard practices which the member states should adopt for the revival of the air traffic. And as you rightly mentioned, it is very important that both the member states' consent is required for starting the international legs of travel. In this connection, Shifali ji, do you think coming out with a global standard for certification for travel, especially international travel, would it help? Because it is primarily boiling down to the confidence of the member countries to allow foreign citizens into their country. So, do you think any global standard or a certification would hasten up this revival of international operations?
So ICAO has been working on, having some kind of a passport, as it would say, a kind of medical certificates, so that people who have those kind of medical certificates are not really put into so much of tests and whole lot of medical procedures when they travel. But the problem is that at this point of time in the world, we really don't have that kind of medical advances available to be able to do that. What ICAO is insisting is that each country should, make sure that they fill out the forms regarding the contact tracing, and they ensure that the person who comes fills in all the details about his medical health, and thereafter his entire movements, and after he finishes his journey. So I think it's little premature to be able to work on this. Something like this was implemented when there was a yellow fever epidemic, but I think medical science is not advanced enough to give us this privilege as of now.
Thank you, Shifali ji. There are a number of questions about revival of operations to the European Union. As Mr. Arvind Singh has mentioned, there is currently a ban by European Union on flights from India. They have just taken a decision to start the operations for 15 countries in which India doesn't figure. So people who have been requesting flights to EU and especially Italy, I think they'll have to wait for some time while Government of India is working with the European Union. I think it is my pleasure to bring in Mr. Amitabh Khosla at this point and hear from him how the international air carriers feel about the various measures being adopted and how they see the technology being leveraged going forward, and also some of the plans on how they would advocate to the member states to resume the international operations. Mr. Amitabh?
Thank you very much, Kishore. Just to confirm, you can hear me?
Yes. Can you switch on your video, please?
It is switched on, right?
I can't see your. Anyhow, you please continue, sir.
Okay. All right. May I confirm, Shifali or Rohit, can you spot me on the video?
I can see on the video,
Okay.
but the box is not moving on to you for some reason.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I think the video and both the audio are kind of switched on from my side.
Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Amitabh. Please go ahead.
All right, so many thanks, Kishore. Thanks a lot for having me here and for inviting IATA in to participate in this webinar, which is, as has been mentioned, on a very topical theme, which is really the, the natural successor to the opening of domestic is the opening of international. So I think very topical in that manner. I was going back to, when did the suspension of air travel come into play? It was the 1st of July, which is just yesterday, which marked 100 days of no international commercial flights in India. And it's certainly the longest that India has remained unserved and unconnected to the rest of the world by commercial aviation. So it's not a very encouraging milestone for many of us, who've been in aviation. But clearly, I think from the webinar perspective, it's a great backdrop to have for a discussion which is focusing on unlocking international travel. I have a few points which I think might mirror a lot that has been said both by Mr. Arvind Singh and by Ms. Juneja. And one of those is that, the domestic restart in India, which was at the end of May, that gave a clear demonstration that the entire aviation community in India, which includes our airports, our airlines, our workforce, and also the broader community, which includes our travel agents, our hotels, and even the, the training partners in this ecosystem, they are all ready to deliver a smooth international restart whenever called upon. So the way that the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the industry collaborated on the reopening, restart, a smooth restart to domestic, I think gives us a lot of confidence that, international restart as well, whenever called upon, the industry is ready. So the decision to restart international flights, we've heard from the ministry as well, is going to be a calibrated one, as we've heard. And I think the aviation industry in India would like for as early an opening of our border restrictions and the resumption of international flights as can be possible. And IATA too would encourage a restart of international travel in line with the ICAO takeoff guidance, which has been spoken about. The earlier that we unlock, IATA believes the quicker we would be able to start our journey to normalization of aviation, like many other countries have already started around the world. And just a word about Vande Bharat. There have been great efforts, by all concerned for the repatriation flights to bring stranded Indians back. The point I would like to make is that if we can start the normalization of international outbound operations as well, it will greatly help to address the other set of individuals, of those Indian nationals who need to travel overseas to rejoin their jobs and reunite with families. So allowing outbound international operations from India, it will serve to complete that circle of what was partially accomplished by the repatriation flights. And again, on the same, I think the point I would like to highlight is that for international air services, there are some long established rules, conventions, bilateral agreements on which international air connectivity is built. And there may be a risk with international flights starting to be allowed as not as regular scheduled flights, but only as chartered flights. And the risk that we run is that we are artificially converting scheduled international services to ad hoc chartered flights. And even if it's for a short run, if committed scheduled services are being nudged to be replaced by chartered operations, we don't believe it's an outcome which is in the best interest of the broader Indian economy, certainly not in the interest of the passengers, as well as the aviation, the airport and the airline workforce for sure. So hopefully this is a temporary measure and scheduled international services can be regularized at the earliest possible. I have 2 points to make on when we resume international services. And again, I think it's been mentioned, so I will only be repeating. First is the need for harmonization of industry processes, and Ms. Juneja has talked about this. There is a need, for harmonized processes, not only for international aviation, but also for domestic aviation. Again, spoken about by Chairman AI, that the measures, across the different states, as in the case of India, they also need to be harmonized with each other. And this is critical for, imparting that confidence to the passengers and also to enable airlines to plan their schedules. And the second point on resumption of international is that, it's the issue of quarantines. And you may have heard IATA speak about this in the recent past. The impact of imposing quarantine requirements is actually the same as imposing a full travel ban. So the drop in traffic, which you get by imposing a quarantine or by imposing a full travel ban, is similar under both conditions. So insisting upon quarantines for arriving passengers is actually the same as continuing to keep your borders closed. So I hope that this is one perspective which can be taken on board when we start to lift restrictions on international travel. And we hope that it would be without quarantines, but of course using all of the preventive measures which the ICAO takeoff guidance talks about. And in fact, IATA had recently undertaken a passenger survey across 11 different countries, of which India was one as well. And on the issue of quarantines, 83% of the recent travelers, they said that they would not consider traveling if it involved a 14-day quarantine period. And air travelers were in fact equally concerned about the quarantine measures as they were about contracting COVID-19, in the course of travel. So that's about, the two aspects that I wanted to highlight while talking about resumption of international travel. there are a couple of other related aspects that I would like to focus on. And this is, the area of some of the data that I was threatening my other Mr. Khosla colleague with at the start of this. So there is one, the issue of the financial impact of COVID-19 on the airline industry. And I would like to also address, what the impact on India would be. And secondly, I would like to talk about the, issue of passenger confidence, which I think all of us collectively as aviation stakeholders have a huge responsibility with. So firstly, the financial impact of COVID-19. Financially, 2020 will be the worst year in the history of aviation. And for airlines, IATA is predicting that a global loss of $84 billion will be there in 2020. And globally, we have also started seeing, for several airlines, they are starting to file for bankruptcy protection, for example. So IATA is forecasting that airline revenues from which, the airlines pay the taxes, the charges, and the fees downstream into aviation, the airline revenues will fall by 50% in 2020. And the industry, which earned $838 billion in 2019, it will reduce to airline revenues to an extent of $419 billion in 2020. So the industry is being cut down to half of its size of 2019, with its resultant impact on, city pairs being connected, the frequencies, the loads, and very importantly, the employment in the industry as well. So if that is not depressing enough at a global level, the airline industry in India will also not be spared either. And we expect that passenger revenues in India will fall by more than $11.2 billion. And passenger demand decline, which is nearly, matches very closely to the 50% decline globally. For India, we expect a 47% decline in passenger demand, which eliminates 90 million passengers from the India traffic numbers for 2020. And again, the impact on employment, we are expecting for India, 2.9 million jobs would be at risk, which of course is not just simply airlines or airports, but it also includes, the sectors which are dependent on aviation. And so COVID-19, and I think make this point again about employment, that COVID-19 is emerging as a great destroyer of livelihood and employment in aviation and travel in India. And the sooner that we are able to open and restart, I think the more would the industry be able to protect some of these jobs. And a short related point here is that many governments have in fact provided economic relief to their industry, especially those which view aviation as a strategic and a key driver for their national economies. And these are governments who would like have aviation to come out of the pandemic in a shape where they still have viable airlines when the recovery starts. So governments like in the US, Singapore, or in Australia, among many others, they have to date provided $123 billion in cash aid to their airlines. And this could be in the form of the loans or wage subsidies, for example. So that's on the financial impact. The second point, which I think is equally critical, is about the need to, impart or build passenger confidence. Again, it's been spoken about earlier, but clearly it's emerging as the most critical part if we are going to talk about a recovery for aviation. So demand right now is impacted, because borders are closed and there are capacity restrictions. But I think clearly a significant part of the impact on demand is also on account of people being afraid to fly. And so therefore, I think collectively, as the stakeholder community, we need to build and work on passenger confidence, and that would be the key. IATA had undertaken a passenger survey, which I just mentioned, about 11 countries, which included India. And We did that first in April, and then we've recently undertaken the same survey, at the beginning of June. And what's clear to see is that, we have a major problem to address with regard to passenger confidence. And the survey shows that, passengers are far more cautious now in June than they were just 10 weeks back. And more than half of the passengers which were surveyed in June, said that they would wait for 6 months or more before they fly again. So, the impact is dramatic in terms of passenger demand. And I think the way to work on this is really, once again, to instill passenger confidence. And, clearly what seems to be critical and, top of mind for passengers is that the risk of infection that air travel may pose. So I have my final, two areas that I would like to talk about, with regard to how do we address this issue of building passenger confidence. So one is that, we've heard about the ICAO CART takeoff guidance, and IATA supports this fully. And, it's actually in line with what we refer to as the multi-layered approach to biosafety. And it includes all of these many measures, which all of us are very familiar with by now, which includes, wearing of masks, social distancing where possible, healthcare declarations, more frequent sanitization, and even the passenger processes in aviation to be contactless and automated to a significant extent. So this layered approach addresses, the risk of infection during travel. And it's in line with also the aviation, decades old philosophy in aviation, which is for risk mitigation. It has been effectively used for, matters related to safety and security in the past. So this multi-layered approach, it helps to build passenger confidence. And my last point on this, on building passenger confidence is, it relates to the need for communication. So we need to reach out. And, this is, again, a collective responsibility on all of us. So as a community, we need a much greater focus on communicating how aviation is the safest mode of transport and how each of the stakeholders have worked to sanitize every single touch point in the passenger journey. So, it's an important success story of collaboration between the various constituents of aviation, where the passengers who are traveling today, they are seeing the difference and the emphasis that is being made on sanitation, distancing, biosafety, and all those which help to build passenger confidence. So we need to amplify our communications about the low risk of transmission during flight. And I think we also need to be upfront on issues like the cabin air quality, that a lot of the OEMs, the aircraft manufacturers, they are also, bringing out studies and scientific evidence to provide confidence in terms of, cabin air quality being safe. So IATA has made available on its website a repository of new videos, infographics, and tools, which are available to any stakeholder to use. These are even available as editable files in case, any of our stakeholders would want to put their own branding on that material. So my last concluding message really is that, if it is critical, so if we can have, all our stakeholders join in communicating the message of air travel being safe. Thank you, and back to you, Kishore.
Yeah, thank you, Amitabh, for giving that focus on passenger safety and confidence building by all the stakeholders of the industry. But I think the one pertinent point, especially from the point of international travel, is this engagement with the member states to dispense away with the quarantine procedures. Yeah. So as IATA as a global body, I'm sure you might have interacted and advocated this with various national governments. So what has been their response? What is their pain point? Why they are not so open to dispense away with the quarantine procedures? And what do you think the industry should do to build that confidence with the member national governments to highlight the point that easing out the quarantine is very, very important for revival of the industry and the economy? What was your experience?
So I think clearly we all see the complication around what's going on. These are early days. It's like a first off situation that everybody is encountering, and everybody, be it governments or be it individuals, everybody is learning as we go along. So whether lockdown is an answer or opening up is an answer. So all of that, I think people are working on that as we go along. So it's similar in the case of quarantine as well, and it's as has been mentioned earlier, it's not just about international states imposing quarantines. We can see it very much closer home with all the states in India as well having different perspectives on this. So I think it's now getting to be a trade-off between normalization, so that we can start with some of the addressing the other challenges which have come about with the total drying up of economic activity. So we need to resume economic activity. And in the case of aviation, again, this is a more recent discovery and understanding that what is the impact on quarantine measures. So I think this is something that we are starting to highlight, which many of the governments as well are starting to recognize. Again, there would be different speeds at which they will respond. Those who are dependent on travel, on international linkages, etc., perhaps they would come on board first, and the others may follow later. And as we go along through that process, hopefully the scientific medical advances in terms of our responses to COVID-19 will also in parallel develop as well.
I agree, Amitabh. I think with the new technologies of testing, much more faster testing and less costly testing procedures, I think that would also give an opportunity to build in that confidence with the member governments to dispense away with the quarantine procedures. Thank you very much, Amitabh, for your detailed views of IATA on this bouncing back of the industry and starting off the international operations. Now we have Mr. Rohit Khosla, who is the head of operations for the Taj Group in the north, east, and west of the country. And as you all know, hospitality business is very, very closely tied up with the aviation business, and also has been very badly affected because of this ongoing pandemic challenges. So let us hear from him how the hospitality industry is gearing up to ensure the safety of both the domestic and international passengers, and how does he foresee the bouncing back of the industry. Mr. Rohit. Mr. Rohit?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kishore. Thank you, GMR, for inviting me to be a part of this illustrious panel. It's an honor to be with Mr. Arvind Singh, Dr. Juneja, and a fellow Khosla on the panel. So I'm really delighted to be here. And thank you for including us in something that is largely related to aviation. Because like you very rightly said, it's a partnership. It's an industry. It's an industry which is travel and tourism. And obviously hospitality and aviation are critical parts of it. So as a responsible corporate citizen, we just got voted as the strongest brand in India, the Taj brand. We have taken, we take our role very, very seriously, and we have clearly defined steps, to protect all our stakeholders, whether they are our customers, whether they are our associates, whether they are the society at large, whether they are our shareholders, whether there's the community at large. So we have taken steps to ensure that we meet and build the expectations towards a safe and secure and a healthy, sanitized stay and meal experience. So, I totally agree with what Amitabh was saying. The main aim, I think today, if we have to talk about revival of this industry, is that we need to communicate with all our customers and potential customers, and build the trust with them to say that it is safe to travel. It's safe to travel, and you'll be safe when you stay in a hotel. So it's important that we communicate, and it's important that we build this trust. Towards this, IHCL, and out of which Taj Hotels is one of the brands that we own, has taken out material that has been put out on the social media platforms, We have communicated through websites on what is our way to deal with this. So I'm very pleased to say that the teams has worked very hard and come up with a manual which covers more than 200 detailed touch points on safety, hygiene, and sanitation for all our stakeholders. And this manual is called Tajness, a commitment re-strengthened. As you're aware, we are a brand that's been around for more than 117 years. And we have, over the period of time, built a very high level of trust amongst our customers, our guests, as we call them. And therefore, it's not about reinventing or, just because COVID has happened that we have to now start talking about hygiene and safety and sanitation standards. It's not that. We already had them. It's now about, it's about re-looking at them, raising the level a little bit, and basically making our guest experience Tajness in the new normal. We have gone beyond, the guidelines of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the WHO, the FSSAI, because, we always believe that guidelines are just the base minimum. We need to go beyond that. And if you were to take some time and go through our website and, look at our social media handles, you will be able to see what we have been doing and how are we addressing this particular thing. Coming to the fact that what are we doing with all the stakeholders? So if you look at associates, and this is something that is happening everywhere. It's on the 4 pillars. It's on the pillars of sanitization. It's on the pillar of hygiene. It's the pillar of personal protective equipment, and it's the pillar of social distancing. So these are the 4 pillars on which we have based most of our new enhanced processes on. And I think all of us have spoken about it. Chairman Singh also mentioned how the airports are doing this, and you also mentioned, Kishore, on how a lot of steps are being taken by the industry to elevate the standards of hygiene and safety. So have we, and it is quite evident and visible in our manual, which is pictorial, and also in our videos that address each and every aspect of the stay experience of the guest. Starting from the time before they come in. Dr. Janay was talking about, a passport. We don't have a yellow fever passport yet, but do we have are you COVID negative? There's a certification of COVID negative. So all that happens prior to your coming in. And so there's a pre-arrival stage, there is an arrival stage, there's a stay stage, and then there is a post departure stage. And all these stages at each touch point, how have we included hygiene? How have we included sanitation? How have we included the use of PPE, both for our guests and for our colleagues? And more importantly, how are we encouraging contactless and social distancing? I think this is very, very important because our guests would like to get the confidence that when they come and stay in the hotel, they are safe, that they're not going to contract the infection from the environment. They actually have to feel safer in our environment that they feel in their own home or office environment. And so that is the level of safety we need to go up to. So whether it is, sanitizers, masks, whether it is downloading the Arogya Setu app, because, that's something that the government has, a fantastic platform. So we make it kind of mandatory for our guests to ensure that they have the app on. It's good for them, it's good for us. It's for everybody's safety. And, we have also, for the temporary being suspended many of our activities which are close contact, like, spas and gymnasiums and pools, etc. Because till we get to a stage where either there is a confirmed cure for COVID or there is a vaccine, everybody is going to have a sense of, suspicion when you go into a crowded area or a high contact area that, I don't know, maybe I'll get it from somebody. So it's important that some parts of our business which were very close contact, we have kind of kept them away now. And we said we start with business which allows us to maintain social distancing, which allows us to demonstrate hygiene and sanitation. So like I was mentioning, whether it is the stay experience, whether it's the conferencing or the meeting experience, whether it is the travel and transport experience, because guests land at the airport and then they have to come to the hotel, they travel through the travel experience. Are the cars sanitized? Is the chauffeur safe? these are the small points, but every small touch point has been addressed in the manual. Our colleagues have been trained in this manual. We have practiced all this, and as you know, many of our hotels are already open as we speak today. We are hosting guests. We have guests staying with us in certain states that have allowed hotels to be open. We are waiting for certain states to start the process. Very happy that Goa has started the process as of yesterday, and we are looking forward that Maharashtra and Delhi and Tamil Nadu, etc., also start and allowing guests to stay in hotels, because right now they only allow COVID guests to stay in the hotels. So we are practicing it, and we have now experience. And through this particular webinar, I'd like to communicate to all the travel agencies and the travel trade that we have been open for business, and we have been doing occupancy. Okay, that occupancy has not been regular business, but that occupancy has been to do with, we host almost 600 doctors and paramedical staff every day. Now, if we are going to do that, we have to have very strong hygiene and sanitation processes. Otherwise, everybody's going to get affected in the hotel. These are high risk people who are staying in the hotel. So we have very, very highly structured, process controlled environment in which we ensure that there is no transmission of this virus from high contact people. So we're doing it as we speak. We have, as we speak, many guests who are coming and staying with us as quarantine because of the Vande Bharat mission. And we are so grateful to the Ministry of Civil Aviation. And like Chairman Singh mentioned, Vande Bharat is a fantastic way for us to restart. We were zero. And from zero, when you start to pick up business, it allows you to, put the new processes in place, get the experience, get everybody trained, and then also get the comfort to be able to deliver the level of service that you want to deliver. So Vande Bharat has been a great learning for us, and we have hundreds of guests staying with us in our hotels across the country. And the point I'm making is, through doctors, through Vande Bharat, we have got the experience now of dealing with the new normal, implementing the processes and the procedures that we thought of, implementing the guidelines of the Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Ministry of Home Affairs, and also of WHO and FSSAI. We have implemented. This is practical and works. So what I want to explain to everybody on the call is that if it was not so, we would not have guests staying with us. If it was not so, there would be breakouts and hotspots all over the country. That hasn't happened. As an industry, we are very conscious of a responsibility towards our stakeholders, especially our customers, our guests, as we call them, and our colleagues, our associates. So, what is important is to get a level of confidence that yes, we are ready, and we are ready to do business. India is ready to welcome international guests. India is ready to welcome guests and provide them the same fantastic Indian hospitality experience that we are aware, that we are known for. Tajness, as you know, is something that we refer to our way of taking care of our guests. We believe that it is a feeling that you can feel with your eyes closed when you enter a Taj hotel. So all that is in place and is happening, has been renewed and has been re-strengthened. So coming to something that is more now, topical to everybody over here, and that is, what are we doing in terms of food and beverage? Because a very important part of our business is obviously the restaurant and food and beverage business, of which airline catering is a very important part too. So, the whole norms of social distancing, whole norms of hygiene, sanitation, FSSAI have been implemented. I mean, we are certified establishments. We are a trusted brand that carries with it all certifications. So it is this trust that will help us to get the business back into our hotels when we open and open our borders. At the airline catering, we have a little bit of a challenge. What is the challenge? The challenge is not hygiene or safety, because we have been doing millions of meals for decades as far as the Taj Sats is concerned. So it's our organization, the Taj Sats, is the highest market share as far as airline meals is concerned. We have been doing this business for long. Hygiene is a given. I mean, you cannot do airline catering if there's no hygiene and sanitation and FSSAI. So HACCP is an integral part of our business. But what is important now is the change in standards. And this is where I would request everybody on the call to use their good offices to send out a signal that just opening the border and opening an airline and allowing airlines to take off and land is not normalization. I mean, people are used to getting into a plane and getting a drink served to them, getting some hot meal served to them, getting a snack served to them. I mean, long international flights have at least 2 main meals and 1 breakfast included in it. It's a 3-meal flight. If you're going to fly directly from New Delhi to New York or to Canada, you have to have 3 meals. Now, how is that going to happen? You cannot take a box of sandwiches and put it on the seat and say that now enjoy yourself, and 17 hours we'll see you when you disembark. It can't work like this. There has to be a balance between what is extremely necessary and what is also practically required. We have to have a practicality in our approach. In domestically, no meals are allowed to stay on airlines. Now, many of our domestic flights are longer than many international flights. So, I mean, why not serve? There are ways of doing it, all right? So I understand that they should be contactless, there should be not too much of interaction, there should be, social distancing, etc. But pre-packed boxes, which include everything, can be provided to the guests either while they are in the flight or before they board the flight. So at the boarding gate, there could be a nice trolley with a display unit. You just pick up your box and go in. I mean, why are we taking away from this whole experience of flying? Flying is not only about transporting yourself from one part of the world to another. It's a whole experience. It's the experience of the airport. It's the experience of the duty free. It's the experience of checking in. It's the experience of sitting in an aircraft which is absolutely safe because the air is safe, HEPA filters, etc., etc., etc. Oxygen changes happening. So I know the airline is a very safe place to be in. As long as the food is prepared safely, the contact is minimalized, I do not see any reason why we should not be allowed to serve food in flights. I mean, we have unfortunately heard some not so very good stories about some people who have taken some long international flights recently. There's just a bag of food kept on the seat for a 17-hour flight is highly, it's inhuman. And we are talking about welcoming people to India, the land of hospitality. The experience has to start from the time they board the flight in Canada, or they board the flight in the UK, or they board the flight in Europe, or they board the flight in Middle East. They have to start feeling India. And Indian hospitality is about laying it out for our guests, making our guests feel at home, making them feel comfortable, making them feel welcome. You cannot have a hospital-like environment and expect tourism to happen. It can't. We have to start putting people at ease. Earlier, as you're aware, in airlines, they said that they would keep the center seat empty for social distancing. And then they said it doesn't make sense because economically it doesn't make sense to have the center seat because the cost of the ticket will go up. So if social distancing can be compromised in an airline seat, I do not understand what is the great contact, that safety issue that comes in by handing over a box of food. I think there's less contact there than there is when you're sitting next to somebody you don't even know for 14 hours. So I think it's important for our colleagues in the media, for our colleagues in the travel trade, for our colleagues in the airline industry, for our authorities in the government to have a more, a softer view of this. Please understand the food will be prepared safely. Please understand that PPE will be done, and we will ensure that people will not be put to any risk. But allow us to provide an experience. Today, we are not allowed to provide an experience. And for me, that is a very, very big dampener. One is to open the flight, One is to open the borders, but then let us provide the Indian hospitality experience. After all, these are tourists who are going to come to India. We have to get the travelers back to India. If they're going to feel insecure, I don't get anything to eat, I don't get anything to drink, I get 2 bottles of water, I have to sit for 16 hours on a plane. It's not a welcoming thing. And that is why maybe, Amitabh, you're finding people are turning around and saying that 50% of the people are saying that they won't travel for 6 months. The reason why they won't travel for 6 months is they don't feel comfortable. All such things makes people feel very uncomfortable, insecure. We have to build security, and I feel for reposing the faith in flying. It's important that we start giving
Rohit.
normalization.
Thank you, Rohit ji. I think your point is well taken that hospitality is a very essential ingredient of the travel industry, especially the air travel industry. And we in the air industry has always been benchmarking the guest service and guest experience of the hotel industry. So I'm sure once the regular operations resume, I think the food would be served, especially in the long haul flight that would be there. And thank you very much for those thoughts about how the industry would bounce back and how robust the practices and new procedures for the new norm. Thank you very much, Rohit ji. Let us take some few questions. We're already running late by a few minutes, so let us take some questions. The first question is to the AII chairman, Arvind Singh ji. Sir, the number of questions on when the UAE operations would resume. I'm seeing scores of questions on resumption of operations to UAE. Can you just give some insights into what is happening in the government and when are the operations likely to resume, sir?
Hey, thank you, Kishore. I used the time when the other panelists were speaking to consult with my colleague in the ministry who's dealing with the foreign governments. And he sounded very confident. And he mentioned two things which I would like to mention. While the talks with US and Canada, of course, going on very smoothly, on the UAE side, he's confident that we will soon see a decision because till flight start, he says the talk going on to allow, there are lots of charter flights coming from the UAE to India, which are run by both carriers from UAE as well as Indian carriers. So I think the talks are going on to allow them to carry Indians, permitted Indians to UAE on these Indian charters as well as UAE charters, which will relieve the situation. And a lot of people are from the UAE are waiting in India to get back home, and they've been here for some time. So I asked him what is the timeline, and he's confident that there will be a decision this month. So he expects a decision this month on that. So that's some easing out of the pressure on the India-UAE sector. As far as EU is concerned, though EU, as the European Union has not included India, he says bilateral talks are going on with France and Germany to allow Indian carriers and French carriers to operate between India and Paris, and to allow Indian and German carriers to operate between India and Germany. And he's also hopeful of an early decision in this from these two countries. So I think there will be an easing out of this, and we'll see some resumption and increase in the number of flights in these sectors.
Very good, sir. Very good. That's very good information and positive information. One more question to you, sir. One Mr. Girish from Delhi is asking about the cargo operations, because when we talk about air industry, aviation industry, cargo operations are also very important. And lack of international regular scheduled operations is also hitting the cargo traffic. So what are your views on that, sir? How the cargo pricing will have, and what are the challenges which the cargo
cargo will definitely it got affected, but it will go up. And one reason is that if you see in the pricing of cargo, there are two components. One is the prices charged by the airlines, which are not regulated, because that's where the market forces work. And the other component is the prices charged by airport operators and other stakeholders in the system. And there is airport operators, as you know, you are very well aware that we are all regulated by either the ERA or the ministry, depending on the size of the airport. So minor airports are regulated by the ministry, and major airports are regulated by ERA. So airport charges are, of course, in a regulated regime. And it is a fact that because the volumes were very low and capacity was low, we see an increase and hardening prices. But it has come down. The prices that we saw in April and May have come down now. And I expect once more and more flights come, normalcy is restored, the market forces will take over and reduce the prices.
That's very reassuring, sir. One more question from Ms. Jayalakshmi from Madurai. This is to Dr. Shifali. She would like to know if ICAO is working on any standardized regulations to ensure safety of passengers and the aircrafts in the event of such pandemics, because there is no guarantee that such pandemic would not recur. So, is ICAO working on any some standard procedures and recommended practices how to deal with future pandemics, Shifali?
Yes, very much, Kishore. I think this is a very, very relevant question. ICAO, first of all, has already got an agreement with WHO, and this is known as CAPSA, which CAPSA means basically collaborative arrangement for prevention of management of public health events in civil aviation. Now, this is a multi-sectoral and voluntary platform where different states can join, and India is already a member of this. And here we have got the best health practitioners advising us on different communicable diseases that can affect civil aviation. Besides this, actually, this platform was formed in 2006 when SARS actually hit air transport in a big way. But now we understand that more needs to be done. So ICAO has set up a task force, and this task force will actually look into the health issues of outbreaks, future outbreaks. So we are going to review that what are the standard operating practices that are existing as of now, and how they need to be upgraded to advise the states for such a kind of a pandemic in future. So this task force has asked for nomination of experts from different states. India has already submitted their nomination in this. I'm happy to inform you about that. Plus, we will also have experts from WHO and other international bodies, and industry organizations will also very much be a part of this. And this task force will be submitting a report by the end of this year. So that way we will be able to once again have a relook at our standard operating procedures and be able to put in place something which is very relevant to the kind of challenge that we are facing today. Kishore, I would also like to answer one question which I have been seeing repeated again and
Right.
again in the chat box, and this is about flights to Canada. So
Yes.
I would like to tell my friends here that Canada is yet to ease its restrictions on quarantine and to lift its restrictions on, receiving foreign travelers. So Canada is being a little cautious, and so far they have not done so with any country. And I'm sure. Looking into the fact that India, Canada, there's a lot of traffic. I'm sure they will look into that. But I think there is a downside of things which I think the people who are attending the webinar should know that the trajectory of COVID-19 has a very important part to play in lifting of restrictions. So the other
Right.
countries are looking at India as to what kind of the way COVID-19 is spreading in India. So and they're wary of fact that many of Indian airports are, by their standards, very overcrowded. So the risk, in these airports is considered to be high, and EU has actually evaluated the different airports in India, and this is another problem that we will be facing, in lifting our restrictions. So I think we just need to wait and watch, and but the process has already started, and I'm sure India will not be very far behind. Thank you.
So Shifali ji, you are mentioning that it will take some more time for Canada to ease out the quarantine restrictions and allowing flights from India. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes, yes, that is exactly what I want to say, because India is not an exception in this.
Right,
So
right.
Canada
Got
has
it.
not done that for any country as of now. So they
Right,
are very strict with their quarantine. They're extremely cautious, because what has happened in Canada is the senior citizens have been, very much affected by the COVID-19.
right,
And
right,
that has made them extremely wary of allowing, foreigners to come to Canada. And if they come, they will always be put into a 14-day quarantine. So
right.
as of now, this is definitely a very important aspect for restarting flights to Canada.
So let's hope that things will ease out quickly at the earliest. There's one interesting question to Amitabh Khosla. This is from one Mr. Bhattacharya from Kolkata. Amitabh, they want to know because the middle seats have some more restrictions on the for the passengers in the sense they have to wear additional PPE and all those things. So, Mr. Amitabh Khosla, do you suggest that airlines should give additional discounts to the fares as far as the middle seats are concerned? Amitabh?
I think I will leave that to the individual airline's commercial decision. But if you look at it from another perspective, perhaps the airlines are tasked to provide additional PPE and gowns. So I wonder if it should come at an additional surcharge. So I think you can look at it both ways.
Okay, okay, okay. One more question to Mr. Rohit. Basically, the in-flight kitchen food, etc. So, you mentioned in your address that prepaid, pre-packed could be considered. Do you think we can use some technology like in GMR airports? We have started a new app called Hoy, wherein you can pre-order the food and get it delivered at the gate. So, Rohit, do you think any such interventions would help out in easing out the restrictions on the food inside the aircrafts?
No, I think it's an excellent initiative that GMR has started, and I think this is just an indication of how very important physiological need of person, which is food and water, is to be taken care of. I think the more systematic we make it, the process oriented we make it, we can ensure that there is safety, hygiene. I think there is no harm whatsoever. I think it's a need of the hour. It just allows things to become a little bit more normal than they currently are. I think food available at the gate before you board is a great idea. I am even proposing that it should be food available in the flight. Why not? Not to the same level and way of so much of interaction or a high service contact, but at least a delivery of food when you're sitting on your seat. Because you're try to imagine a passenger who's got a bag, has got a child, or he's got some laptop, he's got a handbag, and he's trying to carry this food packet, and he's trying to find a place, and it's all very inconvenient. So if once people sit down and they're just given the packet, and that's it. I think a lot of airlines in India.
So you agree that you agree that combination of technology and thinking differently would really help out. So I think I should thank all the panelists profusely for their splendid addresses and addressing all the concerns and giving out their views on how the revival of international operations will happen at the earliest. I'm afraid that we are completely out of time. So thank you all for joining us today. You have spared your valuable time, and hopefully we had something to return to you. There are a number of participants who are really eager to know when the international operation would start to their respective countries, especially UAE, Canada, and EU. I think the issues which were brought to the notice of Mr. Arvind Singh, Dr. Shefali, and Amitabh, I think, and their replies and responses, I think that would be reassuring. And we let us all hope that the international operations, commercial scheduled international operations, will start at the earliest from India to various countries. This webinar would soon be available on the net for all those who would wish to review it or send to friends. Thank you once again from GMR for making this happen. Once again, I thank all the panelists and the participants for attending this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kishore.
Thank you, Kishore.
Thank you.